Is everybody ready to get started?
Sure.
Absolutely.
I see everybody begin. And first off, guys, thanks for participating and agreeing to be part of this panel and think tank. So thank you so much for your time. I think the best way to get started, half of the people on this panel are great friends, brothers of mine, and the other half are great friends and brothers of Charlie Vargas's. So it would probably be best to start by going around the room and let's introduce ourselves, giving full titles, what we do, and then we'll move it along and just become familiar with one another. So I'll start. My name is Sean Perez. I am a co-chair and a part of the Made Man organization, which is an organization that was created by Kai Dell, which really shines a spotlight and honors brothers who are doing great work in our community. And it's used to uplift and just really, for lack of a better way to put it, honor us for the work that we're doing within our communities. So this is the second iteration of, of that ceremony. So I guess we'll move it around the room and we'll start with you, Dwight.
Okay, I'm Dwight Willisey. I'm the West Coast Promotions Manager at Atlantic Records. Good friend of Mr. Sean Perez, and I'm not sure what else other titles you needed, or
that's it. That's it. Okay. Just so we become familiar with one another.
Yes, from New York, based in LA.
Well, you know what? Let me say myself as well. Welcome everyone. Charlie Vargas. I'm also co-chair, and also I'm very excited to not only discuss very important issues with my friends that I consider family, but also with Sean. This is the first time that I think we get to see each other, not face to face, but virtually face to face, and also meet his friends as well to discuss these very pressing issues. Starting today with racial equality and the criminal justice reform. I'm an attorney by trade. I practice criminal defense. I also do some other stuff relating to the community that I practice law in, such as housing and also family law. I also teach at Rutgers University, their criminal justice department. I also, through that department, I teach incarcerated persons at several correctional facilities in New Jersey. And I'm just happy to be here. I'm a proud native New Yorker. I'm a proud Harlemite. And yes, so I guess if we can continue along that same fashion and maybe go to Jamie Santana, another native New Yorker.
Appreciate it, Charlie. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this platform. Very, very important platform. So as Charlie said, full name is Jamie Santana. I'm a private attorney. I've been an attorney now since 2000. I started out as a prosecutor. After that, I opened up my own practice, specializing in criminal defense. Since then, I've been doing criminal defense. I've been an adjunct professor teaching criminal procedure. I've been a judge as well. And so I've had a pretty interesting legal background, so to speak. And aside from criminal defense, my practice has also evolved into handling a significant amount of civil rights cases, personal injury, and other injury cases as well. So I'm happily married. I'm a proud father. And I always believe that being a father is always going to be the most important role I could ever have. Anyway, happy to be here, and I'm ready to share. I'm ready to share my experience with everyone, and hope that it will contribute in a positive way as much as possible. Thank you.
Great.
What's up, everybody? So I appreciate the opportunity and the invitation to be present this evening. I am Anthony Mayo. I am a private criminal defense attorney, or I was a private criminal defense attorney for over 15 years here in New York. I also handled a lot of family court law matters, as well as some landlord-tenant housing matters. I then transferred over to one of the public defender's offices here in Brooklyn, New York. I am, for the most part, a native New Yorker, absent about 3 years that I lived in Jersey. Don't tell anybody, but for the most part, I've resided in New York. I've also been an advocate and a firm believer of youth empowerment programs. I worked with the nationally recognized Youth Build USA program. I've worked with their Long Island chapter, their Queens chapter, their Brooklyn chapter, and their Staten Island chapter. I would say, kind of like Jamie, not just fatherhood, but mentorship has really been a focus of mine. I was also a 2-year academic adjunct professor at John Jay prior to the COVID shutdown. And again, I'm just happy to be here and present.
John?
Good evening, everyone. My name is John Talud. I'm an attorney. I've been for going on 24 years. I also consider myself a psychic because I think I foresaw that was the reason I relocated from New Jersey and New York, where I now live currently in St. Thomas, the U.S. Virgin Islands, where I am working as an assistant attorney general, practicing primarily family law. I've known Sean Perez probably going on 31 years now, so happy to be here and happy to contribute.
Carlos?
Hey, how you doing? My name is Carlos Pimentel, native Harlem, Upper West Side resident. Lived now in Florida for the last 3 years. I'm an entertainment attorney and film producer and film executive. Know Sean Perez, 32 years. As also Dwight and John Tolud. Happy to be contributing. Come from, I think, from the undergrad years in college, from a political kind of Black Student Union empowerment and all the things we did in our younger days. So I'm here to take part and contribute as much as possible and try to push the agenda forward. Thank you.
I guess we can go to the other Carlos.
How's everyone doing? I'm Carlos Velazquez. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Boys Club of New York. So basically an after-school program, oldest operating boys club in the US and the first boys club in existence. So we focus on empowering our young men ages 7 to 21, operating on the Lower East Side, East Harlem, and Flushing, Queens, and expanding to other boroughs. So I'm a native New Yorker, born and raised in East Harlem, actually a product of the Boys Club of New York. Been there for about 5 years. I'm excited to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to just be here and listen and to learn and to contribute. And yeah, that's who I am.
Jason, please.
Hi, everyone. Jason Rosario here. I was invited by the good brother Charlie, who I met in undergrad, Buffalo. So I've known you for years, my brother. So thank you for having me. And thank you all for creating the space. I am the Global Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at an ad agency called BBDO, which is part of a larger communications brand called Omnicom. I'm also the founder of The Lives of Men, which is a social impact and creative agency that does men's work at its core. And we use the conversation around masculinity to have broader conversations around how those implications affect things like racial equity, social justice, gender equity, et cetera. And so those are my worlds. I come to this space with an inquisitive mind, with a spirit of service. And so to the extent that I can be of service to all of you individually and collectively, please count on me to do that. I am going to excuse myself in advance because I've got to jump to a 7:30 call for work. So I apologize, but please do count me in this group going forward in whatever way I could be of service. So thank you all. Thank you, Kai Daly, for inviting me as well. We haven't formally met, but we will shortly. And I'm excited about it. So thanks again.
Cool.
Did we get everybody?
I think we're missing William Cobb and Andre Richardson.
Peace, everyone. My name is Andre Richardson. Charlie, thank you for inviting me into this space. I am based in Brooklyn, but I'm from New Jersey, and I will say that before Charlie does. He loves to remind me of that. But I've been in Brooklyn for about 10 years now in Brownsville. I am a reformed political consultant. I now go by the title of political practitioner. I consult candidates, incumbents and challengers from the congressional level all the way down to the local level, everywhere in between. I ran the first Latino district attorney here in Brooklyn, and we were successful. And that's my day job. My passion is a nonprofit that I launched earlier this year called Build the Bench. And the goal of our nonprofit is to identify candidates of color and then cultivate them and show them how to run for office based on value-based ideas, I would say. So that's something we've been doing for about 10 months and look to expand this work outside of New York City. I also teach yoga part-time as well, and I'm a cannabis advocate and investor.
Peace and love, all. My name is Bill Cobb. I reside in the city of Philadelphia. I'll start with formal titles first. I'm the former deputy director at the American Civil Liberties Union, where I ran the Campaign for Smart Justice, which is the largest campaign in their 100+ year history. I live in Philadelphia, where I previously served on the board of the Defenders Association, and I currently still serve on the board of Community Legal Services, Philadelphia Legal Assistance. My nonprofit is Redeemed. Its mission is to eliminate systemic discrimination practices aimed at people living with arrest and convictions. My political consultant company is Cobblestone Solutions, where I do very similar work to what Andre just described. And my last thing that I did was I'm still senior advisor to Jamal Bowman in the 16th Congressional District in New York. He and I launched this campaign, and we were very successful, as you all know. And I'm here because Kai and my colleague here, Malik, asked me to assist in the crafting of the white paper, as I'm also serving as an informal advisor to the Biden team.
Okay, everyone. Well, the reason Sean and I are here is because Kaidel invited us to, participate in this think tank. Kaidel, if you could just speak on your initiative, the amazing work that your organization is doing, and this 100-day call to action.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much again for coming on board. Special shout out to Sean and Charlie. I called them last minute to come on board to chair this initiative for New York. So I really appreciate y'all stepping up and bringing such incredible leaders to the table. This is definitely a pleasure, and I'm honored to meet all of you, as well as humbled. Just a quick bio on me. I'm a psychologist, and my background is in poli-sci as well. NYU grad, lived in Brooklyn, New York, just relocated to DC, just in time for the pandemic, thank God. So good luck to y'all in New York. I understand the pain and the joys at the same time. In the meantime, I started the Made Man a number of years ago as a psychologist, just having a background and seeing a lot of ills in our community with Black men, in reference to incarceration, single parent home. My mom was a single parent of 7. My brother was incarcerated. As a psychologist, I just saw too much going on and not enough positive. So I decided to step away from behind the desk and stop trying to figure out what's going wrong and try to figure out what's going right. So I created the Made Man to engage positive, accountable Black male leaders that have figured something out and ask them to come back into our communities and engage in community programming while uplifting them and celebrating them, because you guys have done something right and the world needs to reframe their narrative of Black male leaders. In that, we go to multiple cities and we honor top 50 male leaders in respective industries. But for you to be honored, you have to do a full day of community service with us. So we take our leaders into high schools to speak to young men. Then we do college roundtables, and we do gender equality roundtables. Then we do a press conference with every press outlet in that city, interviewing our Black male leaders to discuss positive imagery, positive accountable leadership. And we conclude the evening by collecting suits and also honoring the leaders. And then we go to the next city and next city. And we have now gone international with it, bringing in numerous countries. So our goal now is to activate all these leaders as a collective. And a number of months ago, some of the leaders reached out to me and said, Kai, we really need to activate our local leaders because this pandemic is really kicking our behind. So the first thing I thought was our strength is in our voices and our leadership, our manpower. So I reached out to local chairpersons and said, could you please bring on some leaders that you're comfortable with to come into this think tanks. And the purpose of this 100 days to deal with the racial, social, economic, and health pandemic. And number one, we have think tanks in about 7 cities with a 100-day call to action, similar to this type of framework. All of the think tanks will be doing 4 meetings. Our first meeting was on voting education. We finished that. Obviously, you guys came on a little bit behind that, but we'll be doing 3 more meetings. What we will do is we have also a national think tank and an international think tank. And we're going to take all this information to create documentation for white paper development to present to the Biden administration for Black male engagement and let them know we have think tanks ready as advocates for effective policy for Black male engagement. And we're also going to publish some other notable publications. And we're getting a lot of press around this to show the world that we're here and we're going to advocate for our communities. I hope that sort of summarized why this started, what we do, and where we're going. And thank you all again. And I think I will step down from here unless you have any questions for me directly in this moment. Cool. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kai. Charlie, you want to shoot out the first question and just get the ball rolling in terms of this racial justice and police reform conversation?
Sure. And before I do that, I just want to say the reason police reform, criminal justice issues is important to me is because to a large extent, I believe the criminal justice system is a reflection of America sweeping their problems underneath the rug, right? And in this lazy, quick fix, short-sightedness, lives are lost, families are destroyed, and communities are crippled. And in engaging with the field that I engage in, which is criminal defense, I found many things to be disheartening and troubling. One is this sense of otherness that I felt between, the prosecution and the defense. I felt that that in most counties that I've practiced in, many of the prosecutors were not from the state or were not from these communities that they were prosecuting, right? So that's just something that I found to be very troubling. So I know we can probably arrive at a century if we were to add the years of legal experience on this Zoom, right? And also judging by Anthony's beard. But, I just want to ask this question to the non-attorneys as well, to those like I know Carlos Velazquez, who comes face to face with the youth and their issues with the law. I just wanted to ask this, general question to everyone on this. What is the most troubling thing that you're seeing right now in your line of work as it relates to criminal justice?
Is that for anyone, Charlie?
That's for everyone. Yes.
I'll jump in,
Sure.
Jason, just because I got to jump off soon. But I think it's in my line, and I'm no attorney, of course, right? So I respect everyone here that is, and so my comments are going to come from a slightly different place. But I would say that when we look at young men in particular, and Carlos will jump in here because I know we've had this conversation, what we tend to look at in terms of behaviors, right, or issues that might lead them to interact with law enforcement, we might assign a moral compass to those issues and not necessarily treat them in some cases as mental health issues, right? Or as other issues that affect the outcome or the behavior. And so I wonder if in this process or in this conversation, if we're having conversations about reform, where is there an opportunity to bring that further upstream to address social emotional issues, social economic issues that might affect the outcome that oftentimes leads to young men dealing with law enforcement. So that's my only comment, but I just think it's a provocation that I'd like for us to keep at the forefront of our minds.
Thank you for that, Jason. Anyone else?
I think I can offer, I don't know if you can say, at least within, let's just say, the criminal defense area or the criminal legal system, that there is a biggest problem. But I think if you talk about just in terms of perception, awareness, recognition, I think, and Brooklyn probably does the best job out of the 5 boroughs here in New York City in understanding that a individual who is system engaged has a whole backstory that in all likelihood kind of created the circumstances or the conditions and contributed to them in a way that needs to be understood, recognized, and taken into account. But I think that a number of prosecutors don't have the life's experience to understand, trauma, and particularly the trauma that our clients, have lived with their entire life, that is generational and that is oppressive in such a degree that it completely shapes, a person's thought process, and rationality and decision making. And too often, right, and that's part of the way that the job of the prosecutor is designed, they have a law enforcement approach, a very incarceration first approach, a very heavy-handed approach, very patriarchal. You did something wrong, you should know better, you do know better, we're going to punish you, to the fullest extent of the law. And I think that they, by and large, just don't even have an understanding, don't have an ability, maybe not even a desire to be compassionate or to really peel back the layers of the onion and understand why certain actions may have been taken. And I can tell you from having witnessed a number of cases, even, over the last 6 months, even with all the awareness that, some people are claiming that they now have with respects to the, the systemic ills, there still is a complete disregard and minimization of what has gone on for, more than 200, 300 years that has led to this point, right? And so to kind of just be very dismissive of it, which many cases they are, is a huge problem. Not recognizing it, not understanding it, and having a perception that it's, we all go through it and, we all have problems. You don't see this person doing it. It's just such in my opinion, just an incredibly dismissive attitude. It does no one no good. In fact, it does enormous harm when you come to the table as a prosecutor with that mindset. So that's just kind of part of my take on it.
I think we know with youth every day, I'm taking perception and recognition is really focusing on our young people and how they perceive themselves and how they recognize the issues around them and how they address them, and approaching it with the ability to inform them or help create this perception of themselves where it's not that I only do good or bad things, but that I'm informed about the decisions I make and I understand how to approach different situations. We do a lot of work with working with law enforcement and working with the district attorney's office to help get our youth to understand the system, understand how to operate within that system, but also how to become advocates for themselves and their community. And that helps with the perception of the world around them, and recognizing, you know, what are steps they need to take if they get in a situation, or what are steps they need to take to not be put in certain situations. So I think a lot of it is before we can have perception of others, it's having perception of who we are and what we bring to the table, and then create a skill set around that, which I think is lacking in the work that we do in this field, where there's a lot of work on how not to be what people don't want you to be, instead of being your best self and understanding what that is.
You know, I think the criminal justice system is and will always be a very interesting dynamic. You know, you have a dichotomy going on, and that is, okay, what are we expecting of the criminal justice system, and also what are we expecting of ourselves? It's difficult to assess what we are expecting of ourselves when oftentimes we are facing so many uncertainties with respect to the imbalance in the criminal justice system. When you have inequities, we're not all on the same playing field. So for some, subjectively, they already feel and believe that they are at a disadvantage to begin with. And so what happens is, and I think this was made reference to earlier, you have, for example, prosecutors who are prosecuting, arriving at their position, whether it's geographically or what have you, with already formed preconceived notions in terms of what it is to be Black, what it is to be brown, what it is to be white, and be perhaps subjectively better than the Black and brown community, or different. These are preconceived notions that they have. Just with many police officers who are policing in communities they are not familiar with. I don't care how much training prosecutors and police officers go through. You will never be able to literally delete these preconceived notions from their minds. By the time they enter these communities as prosecutors and police officers, it's too late. So we can talk all day about, well, we need to change the training. It's too late. We need to back it up. We need to go way back, and let's start to dissect and analyze the reasons as to why they feel the way they do to begin with. That's where it starts. That's where it starts. And I've experienced it on all levels. I can recall as a prosecutor, I would have officers come into my office and we'd be preparing for a trial or going over a case. And in many instances, I would discover that they were flat out lying. Now, you have two types of prosecutors at that point. The prosecutor that's going to sweep it under the rug and continue to move forward, and just to get that conviction or have a defendant plea out. Or the prosecutor that says, and this is what I did, you know what, you're lying, you lack credibility, and dismiss the case. You don't have a lot of prosecutor that has the guts to do that. And that translates prosecutors, they become judges. And so judges oftentimes have the same mentality. They don't have the guts to dismiss cases, to suppress evidence, to make the right decisions. They just don't do it often enough. And so prosecutors and the criminal justice system as a whole continues to perpetuate these inequities and negative implications. Because what we're really talking about is the criminalization of poverty. That's what we're talking about for many of our communities. And it's unfortunate, it's shameful. And I can only pray that in the near future, we continue to see more and more change.
I have a question, since I'm kind of I'm just a Black man here, not back with the legal expertise or in the criminal system or the legal system. But from the outside looking in, and I want to ask this of the room here, do you feel the intention of the criminal system is to right a situation or fill a quota? Because in my experience or outside looking in, I don't see any, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, any desire to figure this situation out. Is this person really doing this thing? Is this person lying? It's, I got to run this through. This looks like this, if we go this way, this will get guilty or not guilty real quick. And let's move this along. I don't see the care in the situation, in the community, or the people about what's going on. I don't see the care in, I think this person is not guilty, even though everything is pointing towards it, for me to fight for that. I don't have time for this. It's easier to just get this person in jail and move in the system. I don't see it as like I used to think that the criminal used to be called criminal correction. I think the correction part is totally gone. And it's just about criminal, rebuttal or enactment. You did this, this is what you criminally get. Not you did this because of this, how can we correct it so it doesn't happen again? I don't see that part happening anymore. But I want the room to speak to that because you were more in play with that.
I agree, Dwight. I would certainly agree. Take a drug case, for example. What's better, incarceration or rehabilitation? When I was a judge, I would look at a case on a case-by-case basis. I would look at the individual. I would not look at the case. There's a big difference, individual versus case. If you're sitting as a judge and you're just looking at a case, every case on the surface may appear to be the same, but if you look at the individual, and I mean, look at their rap sheet or lack thereof. Look at their family history. Have they had an opportunity in the past to enter a drug program? Okay, this individual has 20 arrests for petty larceny. There's an underlying issue there. Do you throw the book at this person? Of course not. But not enough judges do that. So I agree with you, Dwight. There's a lack of empathy and sensitivity within the criminal justice system. And procedurally, I like to think that as of January 1st of 2020, the criminal justice system is perhaps heading in a better direction. I do believe procedurally, the system has attempted to ameliorate itself, if you will, with respect to discovery rules and things of that nature. But is it enough? Because at the end of the day, judges still have the upper hand with respect to making a lot of these determinations, and the prosecutors, they still make the offers. So, there's still a lot to consider.
Yeah, and just following real quickly, I was just wondering what the ratio was, because when this movement happened this year, this national awakening about what the criminal system is doing and not doing and where it stands, I just saw there's obviously something's not working, and I seen such a denial to even address that it might not be working. That's what confused me. I was like, there's so many people saying we don't agree with how this is going on. I don't say defund the police, but let's take a look at it. And I saw such a resistance to even look at it. Like it felt like, we just want to penny push these people through.
Dwight, I just wanted to say something to that, really quick. I'm sorry. I don't think there's an incentive to do the right thing. I think actually people are incentivized to keep their jobs. If you're a judge, there's a lot of pressure on that judge to resolve cases, push cases to trial, especially in light of the logging of cases in many of our county Supreme Courts and criminal courts. If the prosecutor is involved in an adversarial process with the defense counsel, I think that inherently, derives a result that may not be just, as opposed to other countries. I think the United Kingdom, they focus more on fact finding, where both attorneys, both the prosecution and the defense counsel, focus on finding what is the problem, pretty much focusing on the principles of the criminal justice system, which is to be just, to control crime, and to prevent crime. And when you do that, I think you take more of a holistic approach to crime, as opposed to, I'm a prosecutor. At this point, the more cases I win, especially if you're in Manhattan DA, the more cases I win, I can probably get scooped up after my 3 years commitment with the Manhattan DA's office and go make some really good money at a white collar firm. So, there's a lot of interest, a lot of competing interests that are individual in nature that just adds fuel to this fire of injustice that we see happening in the courts.
So I'm gonna be straight up about it. I don't know of a system in place in this country that actually works in the way that it's supposed to. And whether that has to do with criminal justice, housing, education, whatever it is, none of it works. Well, the criminal justice system maybe works the way it's supposed to in that regard. But there's nothing that helps out people of color in a way in this country where we feel equal, which, you know, leads us to a place of, do we look for reform? You know, like the optimist in me is like, you know, we can reform these things little by little. And then after this past year, there's the other side of me where I never talked defund, I never talked abolish, but then I had to say, wait a minute, what we have now isn't working. So I need to be a student to understand like what these things mean, and are there steps that can be taken to correct the systems in place that are consistently failing. It's like the brother said, for 200, 300, 400 years. So I don't know what those things are. I want to offer those things, but what I do know is that if we're talking reform, then it has to be piece by piece. I think some of it has to do with law enforcement, but I think most of it, which I don't have enough time on this planet to do, is really reforming every single system that we have in place, from housing to education to the criminal justice system. Do we want to tinker at it? Do we want to reimagine it? What I do know is that most police departments are way overfunded, and that money can be better suited for mental health and other agencies as well.
Now, jump in there for a second. We're talking about reform externally, meaning the system, whether it's the police, the criminal justice system, so forth and so on. But I want to spin it for a little bit, because part of my life's work is working with young brothers and sisters and helping to reshape the narrative of what they feel success looks like. And truth be told, I'm sitting on a call listening to highly intelligent, well-spoken Black men. And that can be very, very intimidating, especially within our community. You guys, whether you see yourselves as such or not, you really are the exception and not the rule, especially within our communities. So I guess my question would be, is how do, yes, and I love what you said, Andre, you know, there's so many areas that we can dive into. It's almost exhausting in terms of reform. But how do we do our own house cleaning? How do we reshape the narrative of our own people to see you guys as, this is an option for me? I feel like there are a lot of young brothers and sisters within our community that don't have the esteem. They don't necessarily see themselves as book smart, extremely intelligent. The media, and part of it is due to ourselves. It shines a light on the only way out is if you are gifted as a rapper, an athlete, so forth and so on. And if you don't fit within those modes, it's what's left for you. Okay, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get money the way I know to get it. So I would ask everybody on the call, just to start, a dialogue. How do we help ourselves? How do we help people who we know, love, who have been in the system, now have that F on their record, the felon on their record, and see it's okay to take a different route, and it is attainable and it's admirable. And just because you are not necessarily an athlete, or you do not have talent in terms of being a singer, rapper, or whatsoever, there are still ways to get out and make a difference in this community.
Yeah. Sean, I think, I'm sorry. Oh, Sean, I think in order for us to change the narrative, we have to be brutally honest with ourselves as a community. We cannot change the narrative until, in many instances, we move away from this save me mentality, waiting on a law to change, waiting on someone else in your community to do it for you. Mm-hmm. Listen, many people are at a disadvantage. There's no question. But changing the narrative is going to take a tremendous amount of self-reflection and responsibility. You know the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make that horse drink. So we have to start with ourselves first. I think the mistake we've been making is it's fantastic and important and crucial, imperative when we are outraged and there's public vexation over injustices and crimes and being committed against our community. That's great. But we have to do that in conjunction to holding ourselves accountable to whatever level is reasonable. We can't have one without the other. We can't be so quick to say, you see what they did, you see what they did, and then turn the other way when we're not acting appropriately or accordingly. To me, personally, that's unacceptable.
That's the exact point that I want to bring to the table. So it's a difficult discussion. We can look externally and we can point the finger at all of the wrongs that we know are systematic, they're generational, and they have been put in place, designed from day one to hold our people back. But there is a culture within our community that we can police. There's a narrative that I feel we need to change because this gang culture is out of control. And it seems like all of our, and I'm not gonna say all, but so many of our youth are drawn to. There is a, in some ways you're rewarded for not being smart. Even if you are smart, you tend to downplay that side of yourself. So I think it's a discussion that we need to have internally and what policies we can put in place to really just change the narrative and have people have our younger generation look at the people on this particular panel as aspirational, and I can see myself doing exactly what they are doing and more.
Yeah, Sean, I think you bring up a good point about, how do we celebrate who we are in our path and our journey to what we see as our definition of success, because I think everyone on this call has a different definition of what success is in their life. But so many times the people who work with young people in the neighborhoods where we are, success is only one thing. And if you're not on the path to that success, then you're a failure. So for so long, we've been kind of shoving down everyone's throat. You don't go to college, you're not successful. But if you don't graduate from college, you're not successful. But if you don't go to college, graduate from college and become a doctor or a lawyer, you're not successful. A couple of years back, I did college access for a major charter school network. And I did a paper on the definition of success and how so many young people, if they felt they weren't on the path to success of their mentors, they shied away. They shied away from their mentors. They shied away from assistants because they thought they were failing. And I think it's about redefining success is so many different levels, taking away this notion that success is only obtaining an exit from our neighborhoods, right? Because when I was growing up, and I'm sure for a lot of you, it was like, I'm successful if I make it out the hood, right? But I love my neighborhood. I love my block. I love my people. I love everything that's wrong with it at the same time. But I made a decision if I loved it so much, then I'm going to invest in it. And how do we get our young people to invest in their communities? And then we start changing the narrative and seeing that this is not a deficit, but this is a strength, that you're growing up in a certain environment, that you're developing a level of a skill set that no one else has. And we can look at that as negative, or we can teach our young people how to use that to elevate themselves, but elevate their communities. So I think it starts there with the definition of success, but then also celebrating our own journeys of success by going back. And I think that, when young people see us come back and are invested in in educating and inspiring them to not leave, but to do work in their communities, to see themselves as leaders in their communities, then we start changing the narrative a little, because it's not like, well, all the good people are leaving, so, you know, everyone who stayed behind is bad. Everyone who stayed behind is making bad decisions. And I think that's when things start to shift.
Yeah.
Great point. Great point. You know, maybe it is exhausting when you really think about it. And I don't know that there is one silver bullet type answer. It's not one quick fix, as we know. Maybe it's working both sides simultaneously while we are trying to help with reform on, police and in the criminal justice system. I just believe it's equally as important to work on reform within our communities. And I love what you just said, Carlos, is changing the narrative of what success looks like. Yeah. There is no one way to the finish line, as we know, but the goal is to get to the finish line. And I think that it is our duty, it's our responsibility as Black men and leaders in our community, that once we have achieved whatever level of success, we go back and we share and we educate and we offer, if for nothing else, wisdom through our own experiences to show the next generation that this is possible. You don't, because I truly don't believe that everybody, I mean, I look at this call and I'm telling you, like, two of the guys I invited are lawyers. And, you know, it's, for me, it can be intimidating looking like these people are ultra smart. I mean, you guys are just yourselves. But if I'm looking at you guys like this, think of somebody who might not have graduated high school, somebody who might not have gone on to higher education. Even within our communities, it can be very, very intimidating to believe you can reach a certain level of success.
Sean, I just wanted to add to that, which is why I think we have the utmost responsibility to not lose ourselves in the process of our progression. And so many of us have done so in a way where we were one or two men of color in a full, classroom or at a firm or at a law school. And that, what that does to you psychologically, it starts to tear away at any hints of your community, because you don't want to stick out. Whether it's because, you may have an accent because you're, son of an immigrant, or you come from an immigrant community, or because there's some assumptions made of you because of, certain, culture that you represent. And I think while you're doing that, you're also stripping away the tools, and you're taking out the tools that you actually need to actually go back and connect with those that haven't made that leap yet. So when you do come back to the community, you're talking extremely proper, and you know what the things are that you do that intimidate people, that you can be motivating and inspiring rather than intimidating them. You know what you do, and I think, and if you don't, it's because you're not doing the work, and I think so many of us, once we make it out, we get so caught up in the struggle, in the going to school and, working, fighting your way through corporate America, that, in order for you to get there, you have to continue self-motivating yourself. But what happens is once you're done, you start to look at it as, well, why not everyone else? Why isn't everyone else doing what I'm doing? And what that does, it takes you away from understanding that people are different, that people have different skill sets, that also, not acknowledging your own privileges, and what helped you get to that point, so now you may be the exception, but in your mind, you fabricated yourself as the rule. And I think that's what happened with a lot of people of color, specifically men of color, instead of using education to be inclusive, they actually use it to be exclusive. Like, I'm different, I'm more successful, I'm more educated, you're ratchet, and so forth. You know, and you don't have to say those words to make people feel that way. And that's why I think we have a responsibility to find out, you know, what it is that we need to learn in order to reconnect with these, you know, with these young folks. So, you know, I just wanted to say that because I think, you know, we get too lost in, you know, erasing who we are to you know, satisfy this corporate structure or this professional work structure that has been mainly catering to white folks. So, you know, and that's why, you know, The Miseducation of the Negro, Carter G. Woodson, one of my favorite books, and it talks about that we spend so much time wanting to assimilate that we don't spend enough time rebuilding our own communities and actually identifying the strengths and the gems that exist in our own communities. So yes, and that whole thing about success, I think it's very, you know, sometimes we project our own fears onto the, you know, like the young folks in our communities. Like, if you don't do this, you're not going to amount to anything. Look at everyone else. And it's like, you know what, but the certain kid in the suburbs is not getting that pressure. The thoughtful kid in the hood that is not necessarily thinking about money all the time is more likely to be called lazy, as opposed to someone who comes from the suburbs, maybe white, and that person could be thought, you know, as artsy or something else, something creative, you know, because there's a lack of resources in our neighborhoods, we are hyper capitalized. So to us, success has to mean financially successful. It has to mean that you're driving the nice cars. So when we do get a couple, you know, when the young brothers end up getting something, that's why we make such a huge leap, and eventually, you know, not build the wealth that we were destined for. So, you know I went in many different directions, but, you know, I just wanted to, you know, just come back to us and talk, you know, and come back to, like, what is it that we, you know, what is the arsenal that we have to build in order to reconnect with our communities?
Charlie, just to kind of add to what you just stated, there's also a lack of trust within our own community. We don't support each other enough. We don't build each other enough. We don't facilitate growth with respect to our businesses enough. I mean, just put it in the context of being a private attorney. And some of the attorneys on this panel may be able to relate to this. I can't tell you how many times, whether directly or collaterally, indirectly somehow, I've heard members of our own community talk about hiring perhaps the white attorney as opposed to hiring a black or brown attorney, and making comments like, oh, no, this is a big, I need to get a white attorney. You know, ignorant comments like that, only to subsequently end up being hired anyway. Oftentimes after that so-called Caucasian attorney did do a good job. But my point is, you can have a bad black, brown, or white attorney, but the fact that our own people continue to make comments like that from time to time it's disheartening. And it's sad, because this is what they think about members of the community, even when they do have the financial.
Jamie, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
It looks like your internet went out. But picking up where he was, I love this part of the conversation. And I think it's one of those things, we're talking reform. You know, it starts in house. As we are working on reform with these different systems that are set up to keep us down, which we clearly know, it definitely starts in house. And I would like this conversation, you know, as we move into weeks going forth, you know, how do we reshape that narrative? And maybe it's already happening. You know, you look at social media and you see more buy black than ever before. You see more people embracing the black dollar than ever before and supporting one another. So maybe it's happening right before our eyes. But I think more of us need to be very conscious about reshaping what success looks like within our own communities.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, well, this is one thing I was going to add to that Jamie was talking about and that you were talking about is, and this is more difficult. You're talking about a different psyche thought, you know, like I'm big on what we view as success. To me, and I try, because if you keep changing the Joneses, it will never stop. There's always a bigger house, a bigger this, a bigger that. I always try to see success as the three fundamentals: food, shelter, and clothing. If I'm taking care of that, I'm winning. Everything else is gravy. And it takes a lot of weight off my back to feel like I have to do this or that. And I feel so many people in the hood, like how did Chris Rock say, you're as faithful as your options? If they feel there's no option, then they stay right here. You know, if they feel there's any value in what they're doing, then maybe they would have some self-admiration or self-confidence to continue growing. But if they feel like, okay, if I don't have the Benz, I'm not successful because I'm driving a Honda. No, you're successful, you have a car. And I think that type of rethinking is part of the lessons of empowering ourselves and empowering our community to not be such a slave to certain things, you know, just in a high idea what y'all was speaking about.
Yeah, and I think to go with that is also learning and doing a better job in celebrating the journey and not celebrating the end result, right? I fight with my kids all the time in the program. It's like, yo, Mr. Carlos, I got an A on this test. Awesome. How much did you study? I didn't even have to study last minute. It's like, but that is a habit that's going to cost you at the end, right? I'd rather a young man come to me and is like, I got a B. I put a lot of work into that. I'll put more work in next time, but now I'm learning how to work. I'm learning that there's a journey to whatever they do. And going back to kind of, you know, we're always pointing at the successful people because of the end result. I mean, I think it's okay to not celebrate decisions people have made, but celebrate the journey or the path they have taken, even if along the way they've made bad decisions, right? I've had people who've been incarcerated come to my program, people who have done, you know, a lot of different things, but they've righted themselves or they're now on a different path, and celebrating that journey of understanding that, you know, I got to continuously work. So I think that, you know, we're in a society where everything is instant gratification, right? I want information, I Google. I need something, I pick up my cell phone. I want to hear from you, I text you, and I want to hear right back. And it's just like, we've stopped celebrating the journey to success or the journey to achieving a goal. And we have to work with our young people that there's steps, right? There's levels to this. And you got to celebrate each level, whether it's, you know, the Benz or the Hyundai, right? You got there, and that's fine. But how did you get there, and feeling good about that?
Yeah.
You know, you're speaking my language, Carlos. I often talk about, you know, the journey, because that's the sweetest part of it. People think that the destination is, it really isn't. And just moving the conversation along, because I think we have really, really interesting insight going on. In terms of building esteem, in terms of reshaping the narrative and really helping us do for ourselves and not wait for the system to do for us, we just saw that our vote makes a difference. And I'm going to say something that is so controversial, but just bear with me. President Trump he said that he did more for the Black community than Abe Lincoln. And he probably really did, because he awakened and motivated us and mobilized us to where everybody was going to the polls because we just want you out of here. There has been all kind of initiatives for years to get people to the polls. And we saw this year that our vote counts. And I think that, and I could be speaking wrong here, and I want you guys to chime in, but I think for the first time in the history of my life, I think that our community understands, see firsthand that my vote counts. My one vote counts. So we know right here in New York City, we have a mayoral election coming in 2021. How do we, we have to change the system. And it starts right here with us, and it also starts with the policymakers. But we have the ability to get the right policymakers in place. What do you guys think is the best way to continue to get our people motivated to go ahead and cast their vote, because it does make a difference?
Sean, I think you mentioned something that was extremely important when you brought up Trump. People oftentimes in the political context, they're afraid to even discuss Trump. There's no question for me that he has probably been the most polarizing president that has ever existed in terms of separating communities. That's whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Independent, Conservative. There's no question he has done a great job separating communities, thereby leading to, Sean, what you just mentioned, an awareness, which was imperative. Here's my only fear. My only fear is that just when Obama ran for president, we had numbers, we had everyone come out and vote. I just don't want it to be that people come out to vote because the individual that is at the time the candidate is, in Obama's case, an African-American, and in this case, we hated Trump so much, that's the only reason why we come out to vote. Because if it stops there, then Sean, that's going to lead to your question, how do we continue that? We can't stop it there. To answer your question, I believe what we need to do is educate people more on how important the local elections are, right? Because the local elections are going to affect things like who's going to become district attorney, who's going to be the mayor of your city, who's going to be your congressman, things of that nature. People don't know about these political positions enough. They hear vote, they tend to just associate themselves with a national vote. That's not enough. That's not enough. So I think it starts with exposing people to what it even means to be or become a politician. I think it starts there. When you're young, you know nothing about what it means to become a politician or an attorney. When I was a prosecutor, one of the things I loved was that our district attorney at the time, who wasn't Eric Gonzalez, who close friends with Eric Gonzalez, he's doing a great job, but we were required to go into the communities in Brooklyn and teach the young students about what it meant to be an attorney, to teach them about crime. That's where it starts. That's where it starts, because what happens is those very young students, they become teenagers, and then the teenagers become young adults, so that they will understand what it means to vote in your local election. And we're not always behind the 8 ball. I feel like we're always behind the 8 ball. We need to keep our feet on the pedal, do it aggressively, respectively, do it within the bounds of the law. If we're attorneys, we need to do it zealously, but consistently. We can't be effective if we're not doing it consistently. We can't be out, marching today when something happens, and then 6 months later, we all just all fall back into a position of complacency. We can't do that. We can't do that. I think in order to be taken seriously, we need to remain consistent. I think that's the key.
I do think that, just to echo Jamie's sentiment, in order for us to be taken seriously, we have to invest, our money, our dollars, our resources into making sure that Black Twitter continues to thrive. And when I say Black Twitter, I'm not just saying Black Twitter. I'm talking about Black voices of color. I'm talking about Black journalists that for so long, you know, they weren't able to get those interviews with those candidates. And now you see them getting those interviews with those powerful candidates, and therefore asking the questions that are necessary to be asked, you know, when it comes to representing the interest of the community. And you see that whether it's with thegrio.com or other journalists out there. And I think as long as we continue to empower these journalists that that are out there asking those tough questions, and we continue to give them the respect that they deserve, the community will follow.
So I think there's a couple of things I want to say. So one, Sean, you said it best. You know, you were talking about the historic turnout. I think this was an election where more people voted against something than they voted for something. Just because we saw what has happened the last 4 years. But regarding, you know, the local stuff. So 2020 has shown me two things. One, and Charlie, you and I have talked about this, the art of the pivot. And two, that everything I'm doing, I need to go deeper, not wider, but I need to go deeper in what I'm doing, because I heard too many conversations during this campaign from people of color who kind of like, no, but you know what? I got this bag under Trump, and you know, we got to be at that table. And I'm like, these are dangerous conversations, because they were happening online in public forums. And you know, pre-2016, maybe you didn't, being a Republican wasn't such a bad thing, right? Maybe, I don't know. I've never been one. But post-2016, it was a very polarizing thing, especially if you were a person of color and you saw everything that was happening. So here's how I look at this. And Jamie, you said it. You said that you were this type of attorney who didn't look the other way. And there's attorneys that would sweep it under the rug. I think the same thing goes for people who have the power to make decisions as politicians around laws in our cities and our states, wherever, that we all have a responsibility to play regarding politics. And it's about, for me, electing the right leaders. This is the work that I do with the nonprofit. I look at this call, I'm like, I don't know if any of y'all ever thought about even running, but it's
all better run, Andre. They all better.
Right, exactly. That's
what I'm about to start a pack, and we will be calling all of you. Me and Drake got this.
I already tell we were in the same cloth, brother. But yeah, I think it's all of y'all. It's our spouses. It's our family members. It's our friends. Like, these people these people that are running are like, this is their life's ambition, and they're doing it in a very conventional way, but it's going to take like different types of thinkers who are not embedded in this system that are really going to make the differences we're all talking about. So even if it's not Jamie, if it's not Anthony, if it's not Charlie, y'all know somebody. And if you don't know somebody, then one of us needs to introduce us to that person and get behind that individual, whether it's financially, whether it's going out there and volunteering. And this is what I mean by going deeper. Like, I work for some of my clients are very notable politicians. I never imagined myself in the streets this past summer, but I was in the streets every day because I'm like, this shit is fucked up. And I think progress was absolutely made, but it has to be made on so many different levels. So electing the right folks, getting behind the right folks, even identifying the right folks. You know, I don't think we all know how much power we have. And for some of us, it may be our sons or daughters who are 25, right? Or even younger than that. It doesn't matter. We all know talented people that we could help elect to office and be these decision makers, and start to, you know, perpetuate a better society, begin that work. I'm gonna run all of y'all, matter of fact. I need everybody's address, know where you live.
I think you just hit the nail on the head, Dre. It is really reiterating to our community the power that we have. And it really is in that vote. So yes, I totally agree with you that this election, it was voting against something, more for something, but the end result was still the same. And if we can reshape and we can change the lens, the perspective, the vernacular within our community that, look, voting is cool. It's actually a change maker. We do have the power. If we show up, us, people of color, we are the difference makers in any election, locally or nationally. And I just don't want to see us go back to complacency and comfort, because it is easy now for us to feel like, hey, we got our way. In 2008, we got our way. We came out big for Barack. In 2020, we came out big in the opposite direction to get Trump out. But if we came out year over year for local elections as well as the national elections, and we could continue with this level of empowerment, all of the policies and reforms that we're talking about, it's inevitable because we're putting the right people in place with our vote. So I really think that, yes, we can have these discussions about what reform looks like within law enforcement. We can have it with it looks like within our community, but we can actually help shape that if we put the people in office that we know can implement policies.
Sean, can I piggyback on that? Because this is about New York. It's not about Philly at all. I want to say to you brothers that y'all actually, it's already happening in New York. I reached, like Dr. Jamal Bowman, who ran for Congress, he didn't do that as a direct result of Donald Trump running. Jamal did that because as an educator in New York, he didn't have control over the resources, over the curriculum that the students were teaching, and so many other problems. So Jamal brought candidates to me who had promised Jamal that they would put him in charge of education in the state of New York. I chose to decline every candidate that Jamal ran, that brought to me. But when Jamal decided that he was going to run, we launched his campaign. That was proactive. It wasn't in response to Donald Trump. I met him many years before with an exceptional project out of New York City. So New York, y'all are already doing it, and you already have a model for what can happen if brothers just come between one another, decide to take power and to root it in love and to heal, and then to distribute that power equally and equitably throughout. So I really do want to touch base with just everything that you guys have given us so far in regards to the white paper stuff. I have a lot of stuff here already, so I don't have anything else to contribute, but I look forward to talking to all of you brothers. I'm amazingly proud, so humbled to be among all of you superstars and black men. It's an amazing night for me just because of all of you, so thanks.
Can I just add one thing really quickly?
Likewise, Bill.
I just want to say one last thing, because I realized like I was telling a lot of folks like what we could be doing, and in that I realized I have work to do as well. So if anybody wants to get plugged in locally in New York, I will find that person to plug them in. If I don't know that person, then I'll find somebody who knows that person.
Sorry, somebody's background noise is very loud. I
think it was Dwight. But so I guess we're almost closing. We're almost closing off. I think all of this is impactful. And thank you, Sean, for reminding us that what our responsibility is as far as just putting word to action. What we can do with our resources. I just beg you all to also consider that this, for many of us, doesn't come naturally. Actually putting in our resources, keeping our communities informed. Many of us you know, and I'm generalizing here, but like, I know there's a difference between good schooling and not so good schooling. And, you know, in the good schools, the young kids, you know, gained their self-esteem by performing well in their classes, as opposed to the not so good schooling where the kids gain their self-esteem by being the funniest, by being the most athletic or you know, the toughest. Okay, so this really stems, we're talking about years, and you know, in doing this work, we have to acknowledge that we're trying to change some of these players' game in the last inning, you know, and it's, you know, it's about making it cool to be informed, to know about what moves in your community, but it's not going to be an easy task. You know, there's years and years of historical inequities that play a major role into the psychology of it all. So, you know, I just wanted to say that piece. Anyone else has any closing remarks?
Yeah, I would like to just say one thing before we go. Is just that, you know, you make a good point. Is right. We can't wait to the last inning to kind of get into the game. And when I'm hearing us talking about cultivating leaders that exist now, is about we need to cultivate the leaders that are coming after, right? Because we can't do all the work with what exists now, and then it just all falls off. You know, we do this thing at the Boys Club for the last 2 elections where we encourage our boys to encourage people to vote for those who don't have a voice, right? So in 2016, we had the boys going out and just basically parading around the neighborhoods and giving people high fives when they saw them with their little sticker that says, I voted, and informing people why it's so important to vote. So I think it's, you know, we have to do it at both ends, right? We need who's in the game now and who's ready, but who are we getting ready to step up? And that starts all the way back. And I encourage, you know, all of you to really take an active role in any way you can. And I know many of you do, but with young people and sharing your story, but not sharing your success, sharing your journey. And I think, you know, when you talk about intimidation, when I bring somebody, you know, into the room and they're just talking about, well, I've done this, that, and the next, it's just like, how do you get there? And that's the impressive part, because it's like, oh, I've been fucking up too, so I can get there, right? So it's kind of, you know, working on just coming out and being comfortable with your own story as success, and not so much of where you're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't mind, Carlos Pimentel, you know, you're a very highly intelligent lawyer, and I know you have so much to share, but you haven't said anything on this call, so I just didn't want to in this meeting rather. If there was anything you wanted to share before we close out.
No, I'm listening, and I definitely getting enlightened on the progressive movement in terms of this group. I talk to kids at high schools and universities, and I get them always excited when I tell them about how many times I messed up and got up again and fucked up and got up again, and how I it looked like a loss, but it became a win. So I think definitely the points of the journey is important. I went to law school because I wanted to run for office. That's my original plan. And I worked at the Federal Public Defender's Office in DC during one summer in law school, and saw that wasn't where I wanted to go. Then I worked at the Manhattan DA's office one summer, and I figured that's not where I wanted to go. But I think that the burning desire to lead and to help is still there. So I'm embracing this conversation. Definitely got things to think about, and just looking forward to seeing where this takes all of us individually, so we can be a benefit to our community.
Yeah, punch your number up there, Carlos, before we get off.
I got you.
Appreciate it. You, Andre. Got a client for you. I got a client for you in Philly, a judge, Andre. Let's go.
Gentlemen, so this is one out of a 3-part series. So the second one is going to be economic empowerment. Sean, do we have the date for the second one?
We do, guys. It is the next 2 Tuesdays, so please lock in your calendar 12/8, December 8th, and also December 15th at 7 p.m. Does this time work for everyone? We tried to choose a time that was really neutral and would work for everyone across the board. So is this a good time?
It's a good time for me, Sean.
Okay, good. So look at it as the next 2 Tuesdays, December 8th and December 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern
Right.
Standard Time.
Exactly. So again, next Tuesday, we will be talking about economic empowerment in our communities, okay?
Beautiful.
All right.
Gentlemen,
Love
thank
it.
you so much. It's been an honor and an absolute pleasure. Everyone stay
Yes, sir.
safe. Peace and love. God bless.
Thank you, guys. Stay safe. Good talk.
Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Take care now.
You still on, Kai?